Reality Bytes.
Welcome to Reality Bytes Radio on the 8th of December 2014, and I'm delighted to welcome back Susanne Posel of OccupyCorporatism.com. You there, Susanne?
I am. Thank you for having me.
Good. Hear you loud and clear. We were talking off air there about the systemic racism, if you like, not just in America, but Britain and many other so-called civilized cultures. But we can talk about that later because, as we were saying off air, there's only so much you can say about it without it becoming, not boring, but I think, it almost becomes, you become desensitized to it if you go on about it too much. And I think a lot of people in the, how should we put it, in the ordinary world, if you like, outside our kind of world, just shrug it off and don't really think about it that much. I say, oh, it's just another black guy shot, it's just another white guy shot. Actually, there's a white guy shot the other day there, some street performer, a white guy, and I don't see any big protests about that, funnily enough. But I mean, it's come to the stage where if I don't see large crowds of white people out supporting black people that get shot, and I don't see large amounts of black people out supporting white people that are shot, then what's the point? They're just polarising themselves even more. But anyway, put that aside till later and possibly discuss it a little bit. But you've got quite a few articles up on your homepage at occupycorporatism.com, kind of going down the scientific, medical, transhumanist kind of route. And it's quite good for me because I've got Aaron France on Thursday, the guy who made the documentary Age of Transitions, dealing with the whole transhumanism agenda. And the first article I wanted to talk about was the one you wrote a couple of days ago called The Revolutionary Pill That Merges Technology and Medicine. And I put a note beside that, it just takes you around in circles, but it reminded me when I read through it of THX 1138, the movie with Robert Duvall, where all the people in the movie were just like automatons and drugged up to the eyeballs, and they were reminded to take their pills, and if they didn't take their pills, they'd be punished. So if you want to carry on with this, start off with this article. And the other point of it, of course, was that Obama's spending $20 billion on this type of stuff when there's people sleeping on the streets in America.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. This is the future of medicine. This is where medicine is going. So get used to it. If you use the medical community for your health needs, get used to this. They're saying that this latest pill out of Queen's Mary University in London, has shown positive effects. What it does is they are texting people to remind them to take their medicines. And so the text messages and the emails and a phone call, if they don't respond, is helping people remember to take their pills. And so there's less pills being flushed down, less waste being created by people just letting their pills expire and then getting rid of them however they get rid of them. And this is, like I said, this is the future of medicine. The FDA here in the United States approved a digital pill in 2012 that you swallow your pill, and this pill will take a assessment of everything that's going on inside you physiologically. There is the pill cam that is was approved rather early this year, and you can send back messages to your smart and let them see what's going on inside you. In fact, I was watching a little clip of a news broadcast a couple of days ago when I was looking this stuff back up, because I've written about this several times, but whenever they have new technology, I sort of bring back the old information to remind people that this stuff is happening, and they're going to see it when they go to their doctor if they use the medical community as a way to stay healthy. And I say that with tongue-in-cheek, because if you're 4% likely to survive chemotherapy as opposed to using, let's say, cannabidiol that you're 100% likely to survive, the choice to me is obvious. But for some people, the medical community is the answer. So the pill cam is a little camera that takes 1 billion pictures per second, and they're able to see what's going on inside you, and as it moves along your tract, I'm not going to get too gross about it, and you expel it naturally. They're able to see what's going on and where they need to go and what sort of things they need to do to get you healthier. So Google also has a answer to this. They're working on several features. They have one feature where they're monitoring your keywords to see if you're complaining about anything going on with your body. There was a gentleman who put this information up on Reddit. He put in the keywords in his smartphone knee pain, and Google started offering to give him information to contact any medical doctors in his area if he wanted to speak to a professional about his knee pain and what kind of knee pain it was, and to be more specific so they can help him out better. And part of this is a marketing scheme for doctors in your area to go ahead and sign up with Google and make sure that they are first in line when you're shopping around for a doctor. It's paid advertising. It's native advertising. We can go into native advertising if you want, Neil, but this is just the gist of this article, that technology is part of modern medicine and will continue to be, and more so, to the point where they're working on nanoparticles that can be injected or swallowed into your body to go ahead and perform the procedures instead of the doctor performing them himself.
Yeah, there was you just reminded me of that it was an old science fiction movie. I think it was maybe in the 60s. Where they shrunk down a little submarine and injected it into the guy to go and find the tumour in his body. And this is, I mean, we're there.
Fantastic Voyage, right?
Yes, Fantastic Voyage. That's the one. Yeah, I used to love all these things as a child, and you know, you just look back and you think, well, you know, what if we knew about all? And you know, in hindsight, I'd suggest they did, because you know, here we are. They're actually doing it. Well, they're telling you they're doing it now, but they've obviously.
Well, the most amazing thing about the human mind is that we're able to imagine, once we have an idea or understanding of a concept, able to imagine into the future what it would be like. The cell phone. Gene Roddenberry imagined the tricorder, and the first cell phones looked just like that. Jules Verne imagined and Da Vinci imagined warplanes and helicopters. And so as the technology grows, the people go back to these ideas and say, wait a minute, maybe we can actually do that.
Yeah, well, I'd go a little bit further and maybe suggest they've already done it to some extent. Possibly not the helicopters back in Da Vinci's day, but certainly some of these technologies, particularly when you're talking about Gene Roddenberry and Star Trek with the mobile phone, you know, beam me up, Scotty. You know, they did look like that with the flip-up top and all that kind of stuff. Maybe they had them back then, because we know they had computers back then. So I mean, I don't think it's a far stretch of the imagination to imagine they'd shrunk something down to make a mobile phone. I don't know, can't really prove that, but just a thought on it. But you mentioned nanotechnology there, and we're certainly moving, as you say, into a highly technical medical era, and we're actually moving away from doctors and patients, as it were. We're going to have there being no interaction between a doctor and a patient, and basically everything being done by automation. Nanotechnology in particular, I mean, are we getting to the stage where you have something like an air freshener plugged into your wall, and it'll give you a dose of what you're supposed to take, you know, every 4 hours or something, sprayed into your home? I mean, is that where we're going, do you think?
Eventually, possibly. I mean, anything is possible when you're looking at maybe, you know, a century into the future. Right now, the technology is such where they have robots performing menial tasks that nurses may not have time for, like regular checkups to come into your room. They have the robots down here in Oregon on the West Coast in the United States. Providence hospitals are utilizing them. They also have telemedicine, where if you live in a rural area, you can hook up to this network, and the doctor can speak to you via the camera on your laptop, and he's sitting in his office. And they also have telesurgeons, where the surgeon doesn't actually have to be in the room, but he can manipulate a robot that is actually performing the procedure in the OR.
I wonder who gets sued if that goes wrong. You can't sue a robot, can you?
No, you can't so far, but then we'd have to give robots rights. And if we're giving away rights, like we give the corporations the rights to freedom of religion and freedom of speech, you might as well give the robots the rights.
Yeah, well, I mean, if the robots are going to have artificial intelligence, then they have to pay the consequences, don't they? But they're being sued and kind of, I don't know, but they just throw them in a skip or something. But there's nothing going to come back on the doctor, I'm sure. They'll just say it was a technical error. The robot just lost it for a second and the person died. What a shame. Um, I mean, this smart technology, in terms of a signal being sent to a mobile phone from inside your body, doesn't sound very healthy to me, because mobile phones, as far as I'm aware, work by microwave technology, which means you're emitting a microwave signal from inside your body to an outside device. And who's to say anybody couldn't pick this stuff up or interfere with it in some way? I mean, it's not beyond the realms of possibility. And yeah, I mean, I can't understand why anybody would want to do this. It baffles me that anybody would want something inside the body which they have no control over whatsoever. I mean, how are they trying to sell this as a good thing?
Because the idea, the concept, the marketing behind it is that it eliminates rather human error. So a machine would be programmed to perform a function, and it performs that function. It doesn't have the ability that humans do to, okay, I'm supposed to be performing heart surgery. Oh yeah, I have to get creamer on the way home from work. Okay, never mind. I'm performing the surgery. Oh yeah, my kid's report card. I got to remember to sign that. Never mind. I got to perform the surgery. That idea is eliminated, and that is the marketing technique that is being used to sell it to the public. Plus, electronic devices are cool. A generation ago with the baby boomers, they watched the Jetsons and they were expecting to be flying cars by now. So the idea that their children could handle all of this cool technology and the Gen Xers and the millennials handling all this cool technology, it's a very easy marketing scheme. It's a very easy sell, because this is a promise that society was promised many, many, many years ago, going back to the early 1900s when the Industrial Revolution started and we had all of these concepts and ideas for mechanisms and machinery. So to me, the marketing is sort of built in over generations, and it's an easy sell to anyone.
Yeah, I was just looking at this, the pill cam you mentioned earlier. It works by using tiny magnetic particles. Now, these are traveling through your bloodstream. I mean, what if you walk into like a magnetic field? Say you're walking past these windmills that give off magnetic fields. I mean, how is that going to affect these particles in your body? You could be walking past an electricity piling which gives off magnetic fields. And there's all sorts of electromagnetic interference going on, everywhere we go these days. I mean, how can they be kind of, isolated just to work in this sense when everything else in your immediate environment can affect them? Just, you know.
I don't think that they're thinking about that. I think they're thinking about the money that can be made, the banks and people who have the money to invest in these sort of things are thinking about the possible profit on the other side of this. Long-term effects for this kind of equipment has not been, there is no data for that, because we're in the initial stages of using all of this technology, so we won't know until 20, 30 years from now. The long-term studies are being initiated right now, so you can't gauge any of that, but there's so much money to be made right now, and in creating a technological bubble like we are, there's so much cash flow going on that most of our hospitals, in fact all of our hospitals here in the United States, and I don't know if it's the same abroad, but they're all owned by corporations. So you'll have a group of hospitals down, like Tennant Corporation owns most of the hospitals down in South Florida. Providence Medical owns a lot of the hospitals in Washington State and in Oregon. So you've got corporations whose design and only function is to create cash flow and make money for investors and shareholders, owning the corporation, the hospital that you go to for healthcare, and healthcare is not first and foremost the continuation of cash flow and the continuation of dividends to their profit, to their shareholders and investors is prominent and paramount to them. So this whole thing is just bad to begin with. It's set up to fail. It's like the Titanic. The Titanic was going to sink. There were so many things that happened even before she took off that would have led to her sinking, and she did sink. So this whole technological advancement is being pushed before we even understand what the ramifications of it are, and it is destined to fail.
Is this all part of the whole Obamacare program? I mean, he's putting 20
it's
billion
part
of
of
your money
healthcare
into it.
in general.
Yeah, yeah. So, you know, I mean, 20 billion's, you know, it's not to be sneezed at, as it were, to use that analogy. But, you know, you think of far better things that could be spent on prevention, if you like, prevention techniques like, you know, decent food and stuff like that. But no, we've got to go down the high-tech route and discover the cause, you know, sort out the symptoms, never mind the causes. There's no investment in finding out the causes of things. It's just finding out what's happened after people get sick, it seems to me. And I've mentioned it many times before on here that there is no money in healthy people. If you've got healthy people, you've no drugs industry. And, you know, I can't see anything other than ill health coming out of this kind of stuff. If you're putting foreign bodies inside your body, which are presumably metallic, if they're tiny magnetic particles, and other microwave technology inside your body, then it can't be doing your cells any good whatsoever. And it just begs the question, who at Google has a license to practice medicine, because they seem to be on top of all this stuff. You know, who's made those decisions?
I don't know who that guy or girl is. I have no idea. But again, this is a corporation that sees an avenue of making a huge amount of money. Everybody needs to see a doctor or see a healthcare professional of some understanding at some point in their life, because we all get sick and we all die. And eventually at some point in your life you're going to end up in a courtroom. So you need an attorney and you need a doctor. And these are professions that never fail, regardless of whether or not the economy drops or anything else. So if a corporation like Google, who is a tech corp, can invest and create avenues to facilitate the movement toward a digital revolution in the medical industry, they stand to make an exorbitant amount of money. The zeros are astronomical. I can't even count them all. So I understand exactly, regardless of whether or not they have any medical staff on there, giving them tips or pointers on what to invest in and what not to, or what to pursue and what not to. I don't know. But I see the dollar signs for them, and I completely understand why they've got their hat in the ring.
Yeah, you can imagine the court case, can't you? You've got a doctor who you've only ever seen on video arguing the case against a robot that's made a mistake. And the robot's more intelligent than the doctors, because we've created the robot that's more intelligent than the doctors, and it wins the legal argument. The doctor still gets sued. That'd be the irony of it.
We don't have the technology to make the robots have a moral sense. We're learning, and we're experimenting with our artificial intelligence right now, but they're also looking at the possibility and the probability of imbuing a morality into the positronic neural net in these robots. So artificial intelligence is not a feeling intelligence yet, and that is the crux of the problem. So do we blame the programmer? Do we blame the hospital corporation that allocated and paid for all of these robots? Do we blame the surgeon or the doctor who was involved? Are all of them to blame? Or do we blame the manufacturer who made the robots? There's so many people, so many entities involved. If something goes wrong in healthcare, if someone dies or someone gets an infection or becomes worse based on the treatment from the robot through the doctor's office, that it's astronomical. The list on a lawsuit of defendants would be huge. It would be several pages.
Yeah, I mean the litigation possibilities are endless, as you say. Who'd you go after? And possibly that's part of the strategy as well. You can't go after anybody really, because the avenues are like a spider's web. You'll never get to the bottom of it, and you'll probably be dead by the time you do. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. You wrote this on the same day, and it's mentioned AI. How many computers does it take to think like a human? I mean, that depends on the computer, doesn't it? It depends on the human, I guess. But again, we're going down the road of artificial intelligence, and as you say, computers have no morals. They have no ethical code. Well, although I'm sure something like that could be programmed into them. But you know, are we going to have to see these artificial intelligence robots given some kind of Hippocratic oath? I mean, do no harm. Well, once they start cutting you open, they're doing harm. But will the robots say, "Oh no, I can't do this anymore"? Do you know? I mean, where are we going to go with this? If you've got a robot which is being given some form of intelligence to basically make up its own mind what it does that override the doctor who's telling it what to do?
Theoretically, if the robot is programmed to respond to commands from the doctor, then the answer is no. The robot is not responsible. It's just following commands. I wrote this article to answer the question that kind of underlies what we're talking about, and I think what a lot of people are wondering, because there's a lot of crazy supposition going on out there, and I do write tons of articles on artificial intelligence because I know that my children are going to be living in a world where artificial intelligence is part of their life. It is quite possible that, like the film Centennial Man, that my son would have an in-house robot that would be like a butler or just a housekeeper or whatever. What that will look like, if it would look like Centennial Man or Bicentennial Man, I don't know. But we are using more and more robots in our daily life. So the advent of the human-looking robot as part of our daily life in our home and in our immediate surroundings is not that far off as far as my son's lifetime is concerned. But the movement toward imbuing and researching artificial intelligence is in its infancy. It's beta stages of different people having different modes of how it should go and thinking and trying out these theories and coming up with products and concepts that will work, as opposed to having all sorts of ideas and suppositions that are just not feasible using physics and science. We're just not capable of that, or it defies the laws of physics, and you just can't create that, even though your imagination can imagine it. The artificial intelligence that is being used right now is used like the deep learning that I talked about in the article, multi-layers of perception, and this technology is used to classify Twitter data. This technology is used to determine whether a text is positive, neutral, or negative, whether we have related two sentences or two similar sentences together, how we construct our sentences and how we text message to each other, how we communicate through text messages, finding relevance in information in our documents, summarizing documents by an unsupervised way, which means there is not a physical human being standing over the computer or the computer program being run through artificial intelligence or utilizing artificial intelligence, that there's no one watching, that the computer can do its own thing. And that is being used right now. Google uses it, Twitter uses it, Facebook uses it.
We lost you?
Oh, no, I'm right here.
Oh, you're still there. Oh, sorry.
I thought you just wanted to step in.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about the parameters, if you like, of what these machines are going to be capable of. And it's, you mentioned there, determine whether text is positive, neutral, or negative. It says, we have the most accurate sentiment classifier available. Well, that doesn't mean it's any good. It just means it's the most accurate one they've got to date. I mean, I don't believe there's any way that an artificially intelligent robot can understand the emotion or the sentiment or the absolute meaning of something you've written, unless it understands the context in which it was written. If you're in a chat. Writing to your girlfriend or your mum and dad or whatever, they can't understand your emotional input to the words you write. So I find that kind of. I mean, what are they just going to decide what's going to be allowed? Are we going down the road of these kind of robots basically censoring what we write?
Yes. That's what they want the robots to be able to understand the meaning behind what we say and the tonality that we use, and understand sarcasm, understand when we're being literal. Obviously, it's not raining cats and dogs, but we use that phrase here in the United States all the time to describe a torrential downpour. The robot would not understand. It would look outside and say, where are all the cats and dogs? So they are working on the ability for the program to understand that cats and dogs means a torrential downpour, and this is just a turn of phrase that we use. Right now, Google has AI technology with their Recapitia, where if they want to determine whether or not you're a robot, there's lots of bots out there on the internet. 52% of Twitter accounts are fake because of these bots, and you can hire or purchase the program or hire a company that will do that for you, and that's why we have so many fake accounts out there on social media. But this Recapitia, when you click on I am not a robot, it instantly looks at your IP address, evidence of cookies in your computer, frequented social media profiles to determine whether or not you are this person, browsing behavior online, and record of movements of your mouse to make sure that you're an actual human being and not a robot, not a program. So that is considered artificial intelligence, that it's able to determine all of this information plus all of your movements to ascertain whether or not you're a live human or a computer program posing to be a human on the internet.
I would suggest it's artificial intrusion. If they're going to use cookies,
I agree.
And if they're recording the movements of your mouse, they can do that. I'm sure they can determine every key you've pressed on your computer, and know exactly
Yes.
where you've been, what sites you've been to, what you've written to somebody or whatever. So it's a lot more than this artificial intelligence thing to make it easier for you to summarize documents. It's got nothing to do with that. It's to do with actually spying on you in a more intense and underhand way, if you like. Most people will think this is great, and they'll just go along with it, not realizing that their whole computer is being scanned every time they're on it.
Yes, absolutely. Well, because of the reason we were talking about earlier, it's an easy sell. A lot of people expected us to be flying in our cars, to be flying and to be wearing all these neat spacesuits and using more technology than we are, and it just didn't manifest over the last 50 years. But now it's a huge, gigantic boom, and it's coming on so quickly that the idea of regular, like mailing a letter, it's foreign to people nowadays. The concept of actually writing out something as opposed to typing. In school, they're teaching kids how to type. They're teaching kids how to use tablets, and even the typewriter, even the keyboard is becoming obsolete with the tablet and the sensitive screens. So the normal everyday things that we're doing are becoming a relic, a thing of the past. And with the advent of new technology, with what they have to work with now, they're pushing it to the maximum to see how far they can take this and use it up until it's broken. And at some point in the next 10 to 15 years, there's going to be another boom of startup companies that will have even better technology. There's one company that just started called MetaMind, and they are using, or rather offer, an artificial intelligence solution as a platform to companies, to businesses, to governments, in order to predict outcomes of language and vision and database all of this information. So as you're looking around your screen and you're thinking about what you want to do, your face and your actions are all giving away possible thoughts that you're thinking about what your next move will be. And this artificial intelligence program is able to take all of that information and then give a prediction with a exorbitant amount of accuracy. So far, I think it's about 60 to 70% accuracy that you will go ahead and do what the MetaMind program has predicted. And that's just out of the gate. Imagine in 5 years when they've perfected this. And so now it's not 60 to 70, it's 80 to 90%.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost, well, it's at the Robocop stage. They portrayed that in Robocop, and they recently remade that movie, whereby that half man, half robot police officer, if you want, could predict what somebody was going to do, and they took action to stop it. And again, it was like thought crime or whatever. And we're getting to that stage where this is actually going to change people's behaviour, knowing that this stuff is watching them. So in some, it's kind of going to have some opposite effect, as it were, because people's behaviour will change. and the computer then has to identify that type of behaviour. And the people are acting artificially, if you like.
Yes. If you know you're being watched or you think you're being watched, you behave much differently than you do when you think no one's looking. And we all do that. I mean, I've got 2 kids. When they think I'm not looking, it's amazing what they do. And then I just, appear in the room and they're like, oh, I didn't know you were there. We all do this, and it's not just childhood antics that are being performed. It's a trait that we carry on throughout our life. So the instilled sociological paranoia that will ensue because of this will drastically change the way that we interact with each other, even interact with ourselves. We might actually become fearful that even the thought in our head would be enough to send out a signal and have a cop show up at our house 15 minutes later, just because we had a thought, not that we vocalized it or shared it with anyone. And that type of psychological terror will create a society that is more susceptible to following rules and regulations that are set forth by people in that capacity than any other time, I believe, in existence, period. Better than religion ever could have done.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, we're getting to a stage where people will consciously self-censor themselves, and not just their writing or whatever, but they'll try to self-censor their own thoughts, which, I mean, takes away all kind of human capacity to just be human. We're constantly thinking about things. It could be something you just read in a book, and you walk along the street and it comes into your head and you start thinking about that, or whatever it could be. But you're going to have to consciously unthink those thoughts, if you like, if you know that it could be misconstrued or whatever by some artificial junk of metal standing on the street corner that may turn around and shoot you. It's just bizarre.
It is bizarre, but it's happened in the past with other things. I mean, think about this. In medieval times, women who were extremely heavy were considered very sensuous. Right up until Marilyn Monroe, she was not a skinny woman. She was kind of chubby. And then in the 70s, Twiggy came out, and then everybody shifted to emaciated women are attractive. But it wasn't that long ago that fat women were attractive. So it doesn't take that long to shift an entire idea of something so base and so necessary for our survival, like sex is, that the idea that they could shift us to thinking that, oh my God, even my thoughts, I shouldn't even be thinking that because the thought police are going to come and get us, would probably only take a generation or 2.
Yeah, I've always said it. There's a lot of stuff in the newspapers about single mothers, a promiscuous society, sexualization of children, blah blah blah. They could change that, as you say, within a generation if they wanted to, by the use of the same methods that got us there, with the TV, the media, the magazines, all the rest of it. They could turn that whole thing around and have everybody walking about in long skirts and little hats and ribbons and stuff if they wanted to within one generation, but obviously they don't, because they want that kind of society to basically destroy itself. But another aspect of this article, it's this character Zuckerberg, who famously said that everybody using Facebook was an F-wit, and here's why. Because he said that his group was formed. This group he's talking about, the one doing this, the reCAPTCHA stuff, this type of stuff we're just discussing now. He said that it was formed to do world-class artificial intelligence research using all of the knowledge that people have shared on Facebook. Now, he's right then. They are F-wits if they put all that personal stuff on there. I mean, we use it just to advertise the shows and stuff like that, and get some information out, but we don't put personal stuff up. But people put all sorts of things up here, and now it's all being used in this big study to develop an artificial intelligence which is going to be detrimental to the same people who started using Facebook all those years ago. Yes.
And people don't realize, and I don't know why they didn't realize this, but with the advent of social media created corporations, a whole new idea of corporations that control social media because they created social media. And this is a corporation. They never were a free, independent service. This was a corporation. And corporations are designed to profit. And if the corporation is not profiting, then it goes out of business. And of course, Zuckerberg doesn't want to go out of business. He's gotten this far. He certainly doesn't want to go out of business. So the idea that anything you put on Facebook ever was not going to be used for purposes for the corporation is a ridiculous idea that we all sort of had when we got online and we went to these social media sites and signed up and started using them. None of us read the terms of service. I didn't read the terms of service until my original Facebook page got hacked and then suspended, and then I went back and read every detail of the terms of service. And again, corporations are designed to profit, and if they can use any information that is freely given to them in order to profit, they are going to do that. And so that idea, that concept that any of that information that we freely gave is not their right to use, we need to get that out of our mind, because that is stopping us from stopping the actual problem, which is if we don't give away any information on Facebook that is personal, that is private, then they don't have that information to use. And it's just point blank and simple. You just from this moment on, from this broadcast on, stop putting personal information onto Facebook, and they will be capped at a certain amount of personal information that they have on their users, and they have 1.2 billion users, by the way. So if they're capped at personal information from today on, they're going to fail as a corporation because they're not going to be able to grow and move with their audience. The idea is that corporations are able to assess what a trend is going to be and provide a product ahead of the trend in order to gain most maximum profits as that trend manifests and then moves, has its lifespan and then moves on to, so people move on to something else. So if we cap them with information now, starting today, they're not going to be able to grow as a corporation. They're going to have to find other avenues. They're going to have to find other ways to get this personal information out of us. And if we just refuse, then the corporation will slowly die.
Yeah, the other solution is to everybody to get on there and fill it full of complete junk, so they can't profile you. Just keep changing your kind of persona, if you like, every other day, so they don't actually know who you are in any kind of intelligible way. I don't know, just a thought. But the other thing that's quite worrying about this is that, again, Zuckerberg and this thing he set up, the conference was the Neural Information Processing Systems Conference, NIPS, nice acronym. And they state that they've collaborated to advance the concept of unsupervised learning for computers. So nobody's actually looking at what these computers are learning, or I would assume what level of intelligence they've achieved. Are they going to reach a level of intelligence where they can hide what they've learned if they're not supervised?
No, unsupervised doesn't mean that. Computers, even the most intelligent computers, are only as smart as my 4-year-old, which is the same intelligence level as a chimpanzee. So we're not talking about AI or like iRobot or anything like that. Nowhere near that right now. When they say unsupervised, they mean literally you sit down in front of your computer and you type in a command. We all do it. That's what a keyword search is. We type in a command and the computer gives us the information that we've requested. These unsupervised sessions are that the computer is programmed to perform a function, and it doesn't need any prompting by a human being in order to perform that function. It performs it independently.
Oh, okay. I'm glad you cleared that up, because I was a bit concerned about that. I just imagine all these computers, these robots sitting around the room saying, "Right, lads, what we're going to tell them we've learned today."
And when it does happen, you can rest assured that I will be writing that article.
Yeah, I can imagine them sitting around cheating on the maths tests, But anyway, we'll go to a piece of music now.
No lizards, no aliens, no nonsense. This is Reality Bytes.
Welcome back to Reality Bytes on the 8th of December. We still have our guest, Susanne Posel of OccupyCorporatism.com with us online. And we're going to carry on this theme of technology and, education. Students, meet your new teachers, Google and Apple. Susanne?
Yes.
Take it on there.
Well, if you can't afford a tablet In some schools here in the United States, the corporation Apple will provide your student or your child with the tablet that they need. Code.org, who works with Apple, is offering free workshops from December 8th to the 14th, so you still have a couple of days. I'm not trying to advertise for them, and here's why. Our schools here in the United States are being digitized. The reason why is because of the needs of corporations. So this goes back to the theme also that we were talking about with corporatization. Corporations are looking to take as much profit and develop as much technology as possible with the technological bubble that we're in, being called a revolution. And with the advent of all of this technology, they're going to need people to write the code, to run the programs, to build the machines. And that is what our schools here in the United States, our public schools, are being turned into stations to design children from a very early age, all the way from K through 12, to assess their aptitude and to use technology more and more, even to the advent in the future of possibly replacing the teacher. Like in Japan, elementary school students, some of them are taught by a artificial intelligence computer, and it looks just like a woman. And they don't seem to have a problem with it. The kids love it. They think it's the neatest thing in the world. So here in the United States, because Obama wants to keep us competitive in this new market that's burgeoning, we need to have not only educated consumers, but we also need to have the people who can run all of this equipment. If we're going to digitize everything, if we're going to have the streets talking to the lampposts, talking to the buildings, talking to your cars, talking to your wallet, talking to your cell phone, talking to your boss, talking to your wife, talking to your husband, talking to the school, talking to your kids, then we need people who can create, run, and facilitate all of this. So that's what these schools are being turned into, way stations to create the next need for employees, for corporations who are invested in our technological revolution.
Yeah, it made me wonder, they're training all these children to write computer code, but at the same time they're training computers to be artificially intelligent, so why can't they write their own code?
They will, but not today.
and that's when we've got real problems, when the computer's writing its own code and doing what it likes, basically. The first thing I wrote down when I read that was that, like you mentioned the schools in Japan, was no human interaction. So you've got no, if you've been taught by an automated system, which has obviously been programmed by somebody, obviously it'll be these children in the future, but it's there's going to be no, it's all going to be standardized completely. There'll be no, there'll be standardized responses to questions asked. If you get an answer to the relevant question you've asked is another issue. But it's basically, there's going to be no freedom of expression, or ideas, because all you're going to get from this automaton is what's been programmed into it. And I mean, it just smacks of total indoctrination, even worse than we have at the moment, where at least it's a human and you can actually question them. But you're not going to really question these machines in the future and get any kind of valid response.
No, not right now. The idea, possibly within the next century, is to have the AI so that you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between a human and a robot. But for right now, they are just as robotic as Robbie in Lost in Outer Space. Danger, Will Robinson, danger. The relatability, like you're mentioning, with children to teachers is the crux of education. The trust and the relationship that students have with their teachers, whether it's good or bad, facilitates how the child views education in the future and whether or not they see education as viable or not. It will define whether or not children go on to higher education. Rejecting the positronic net as opposed to a human brain would have huge ramifications on the people who come out of the education system as they become adults and members of society. What type of person are we going to create? We see how just with the millennial generation, how distant we are when we have the ability to, on our smartphone, do anything that we want. Why to participate in what's actually happening in front of you when you can go online and look and read about it? And South Park did this episode recently that kind of hit home the point I'm trying to make. There's an idea now on YouTube that you go and watch people play a video game instead of playing it yourself. Now, I'm not like advocating video games in total because I think that most of it's garbage, but you would want to experience that video game yourself. But there's a whole generation of people who are watching someone else do that and have that experience, and then vicariously, by proxy, enjoying their response and feeling like they were participating in this video game. And that separation, that veil that we are choosing to put over in front of us between actually interacting with our environment and being a voyeur culture is going to drastically change how we are able to interact with each other, because we are social creatures. 90% of our communication is nonverbal. So it's very difficult to understand what somebody's thinking or feeling when you're talking to them like we are right now. I'm depending on the tone of your voice, I'm depending on how long it is through your pauses, or what your reaction is, or what you say next to what I'm saying, to gauge whether or not you agree with me or whether you're going to be adversarial toward me. If we were sitting in front of each other, I wouldn't have to do so much guesswork. And it's even more compounded when we're text messaging each other and we're not even listening to each other's voice. So then I have to sort of use the emoticons to understand, so you can understand how I feel, and maybe if you use them back, then I know that you're joking and you're not serious. That lack of facilitation in our natural mode of communication is being systematically cut off with the advent of more and more technology. So like you were saying, with the teachers being robots, the students are not going to have that human interaction and understanding of what it is to interact with an authority or authoritative figure, or someone who is just older than you that you are told that you have to respect. This drastically changes even some of the foundations of how we relate to each other as a society. And what the ramifications of that are, I don't know. But it's definitely going to be interesting because it's happening right now.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the teachers, I mean, a lot of the teachers, particularly I suppose in the early years of schooling, would have to think on their feet, because very young children ask, kind of outlandish questions, if you like, that they're unexpected. They'll come up with something and the teacher has to think on their feet, possibly make some kind of analogy that the child's going to understand. You're not going to get that from computers, because they won't have that ability to decipher what it is the child's trying to get across, or what is going on in their minds, and where the question kind of originated and what they were thinking at the time or whatever. But it's interesting, your analogy of the people now going along to watch people playing computer games. It's kind of a step on to what I experienced a few years ago. I used to play soccer every Wednesday without fail. I'd turn up. It didn't matter, what was going on anywhere else. I'd try and ensure that I could go and do that, because I enjoyed doing it, and a bit of exercise and all the rest of it. But it just happened to be the night that the big European soccer matches were on, and you get half a dozen of the guys wouldn't turn up. They'd just rather sit at home watching other people playing football rather than getting off their backsides and going and doing it themselves. And it's exactly the same thing. We've kind of moved on from a physical thing to now this, people are quite prepared to sit around watching people sitting around. It's quite bizarre.
It is, because when I was a kid, we used to go out and explore our world. We used to go out and play in areas behind our house where we weren't allowed, where there was lots of trees, and there was a man-made canal, and we weren't supposed to go down there. And we learned about life and about nature and about each other by playing in these, semi-dangerous areas and having to depend on each other and get to know each other. That is gone. That is almost all gone. Very few children are learning through that natural way of learning by doing it. You learn best by going into the situation, whether you know how you're going to react or what the outcome is going to be, or whether or not you spend all night trying to do the statistics and find out what the best answer, the best possible route would be. You learn by doing, not by proxy. By proxy becomes entertainment, and therefore knowledge and information becomes entertainment. And then all we have is infotainment. We don't have any learning. We don't have any interaction. We don't have any human beings being human. We have entertainment. Everything becomes entertaining.
Yeah, and of course the same characters are all involved in this type of thing. We've got Microsoft, Bill Gates, Google, Mark Zuckerberg again, Amazon, Walt Disney, Facebook, JP Morgan, LinkedIn, just to name a few of the more well-known ones. And the same organisations keep cropping up in all this stuff. And there doesn't seem to be anybody from the outside in terms of like small startup businesses looking at this stuff and saying, "Oh yeah, this is a good idea. Let's do this for beneficial reasons." It just seems to be that these corporations are doing it. I suppose in the first hand primarily for the money they can make out of it, but for more nefarious purposes. Would you agree with that, or do you just see that as just part of the whole surveillance society which is being created around us?
Well, because a corporation's sole purpose is to make money, and because the making of money doesn't necessarily go hand in hand with ethics or morals, the possibility and the probability of nefarious purposes are almost guaranteed. So that is there. Governments and corporations working with governments and working with thought leaders, working with people of influence, that has always been so, and with the advent of more technology that will ever increase, because the ease of working with people has tremendously it's risen to the extent where you don't have to ever meet that person. They could be in another country and all you do is talk to them on Skype or talk to them on a Go meeting, and you've never physically met this person, and yet you can have a complete corporate business relationship with them. And that ability to gauge that or surpass that distance and yet still have the same goal means that the globalization of all of this technology is just it will grow just as fast as the technology will, because the more that they can communicate with each other on separate sides of the world means that the more likelihood that these corporations will be able to imbue themselves in those other countries and work with those other governments and become a system where everything is, like you said, standardized, and everything is basically the same whether you're in France or South America.
Getting back to the money, Obama is now pledging another $750 million of other people's money to this scheme. Not his, I'm sure, although I'm sure somewhere along the line somebody of his ilk or his friends have got a lot of shares in these companies, possibly. But Apple pledging $100 million in iPads, computers and other tools. Well, of course, that could be one iPad. They could just say it's worth $100 million, but we don't know how many iPads that is, or computers or other tools. AT&T, Sprint, free internet services, Verizon, $100 million in cash, Microsoft, and all these characters supposedly giving away all this stuff. But of course, as you say, that they're in the business of making money. They're not going to give this stuff away unless they think they're going to get it back. And it's just the same as the big drug companies giving away free flu shots. They don't give them away because they're nice. They give them away because they're going to reap the benefits of making people sick with them. And this is akin to that. They're giving this stuff away presumably because they know people will latch onto it in later years. I mean, it says it all. Obama asserted that tech corporations want educated consumers. They don't want an educated population. They want educated consumers.
Yes, it's the same thing that if you've ever had a drug dealer, that's what they do. They give you a little bit for free, and then they know within a week you'll come back and buy the whole bag. And that's exactly what these corporations are doing. That's the mentality, that's the scheme that they're using. They buy this stuff in bulk, and they have these orders pre-made several decades in advance. So for Apple to hand over a bunch of Macs and Apple TV and iPads, it really costs them basically nothing to do. But it looks like this whole big thing because, oh, look, this corporation's handing out all this money and all this stuff, and it's a drop in a bucket. It's the cost of advertising is what it is, and they allocate so much money to advertising and marketing every year. If you're a good corporation, you allocate a lot of money to that, and this is just an extension of that. It just gets the population to think, oh wow, yeah, I might not be able to afford an iPad or this stuff for my child, but at least it's in the school and my child can use this. And they're directly targeting Hispanics and Blacks, Native Americans, Alaskan Natives, and Asians for the use of this new equipment because, again, the lower end of the class system is the worker class, and you want your worker class to work. You don't want them to be out of work because it lowers your GDP, and then corporations and governments make a lot less money when they go and do their thing that they do on the stock market. So if they're going to, and they are, changing these public schools into stations where they are creating the next generation of programmers and builders of all of this technology, they're going to want to target the lower class because those are the people who are actually going to be doing the work. The middle class or the upper middle class or the lower upper class would be the group of people that create the startups and create the corporations that the lower class goes to work for. So by targeting all of these low-income and lower-class citizens, what they're doing is creating the workforce in lieu of the technology being able to create the workforce itself. We, like you said, we have automation and the restructuring of what education is happening simultaneously. And in my opinion, that's just because they're covering both ends of it. As technology grows, they will be able to replace more humans with automation, and they're doing that right now. But they still need the humans in order to do the work at this point, and they anticipate that for the next maybe 50 to 60 or 70 years, they're going to need humans to do this. So that's exactly what they're doing. They're creating the next workforce to work for the next industrial revolution.
Which tells you that it's a planned society in the
Yes.
future. I mean, it's no different from the Industrial Revolution of old, where the only reason they taught the peasantry to read and write so as they could read the manuals to operate the machines. It's the same thing.
Yes, it's exactly the same. It just looks different because we have new technology, but it's no different than that.
Now, another thing that struck me about this is, of course, iPads are very reliant on Wi-Fi, and I'm sure the way we're going, nothing's going to be wired in the schools. Very little of it is at the moment, with even laptops in the UK being handed out by companies in a similar kind of program to this, with no Ethernet connections. So everything's Wi-Fi, and I'd imagine the cancer rates among some of these children is going to be horrendous by the time they get through what would be 16, 17 years of schooling or something. By the time they go through the primary system, the secondary system, college, university, and they've been bombarded with Wi-Fi for the best part of 2 decades. I think there's going to be a lot of sick students at the end of that. And then I suppose Big Pharma will come in with their nanotechnology pills to make them better. Who knows?
You got it.
Yeah. Well, it's a big circle, isn't it? It's just a big crime cartel with the same characters all involved in it. I think we'll go to another piece of music and then we'll move on to something kind of linked to that. It's a eugenics kind of program being run by Google. That's the 23andMe program, which makes it easier to have the perfect child, apparently. So we'll go to a piece of music and we'll come back and discuss that. Come back to Reality Bytes with our guest Susanne Posel of OccupyCorporatism.com. The next article, again, those Google guys at it again. And we're talking about 23andMe, which you've written rather extensively on in the past. 23andMe makes it easier to have the perfect child. So we're now talking eugenics. Google's involved in creating the super baby. In the UK, for €125, I don't know if you meant pounds there, or that's about £100, citizens can now purchase a home test kit that will analyse their genetic makeup and the information contained in their cells, thanks to 23andMe. How nice of them. So what's this about, Susanne?
Well, they have a swab test that it's a home kit that you can order, and they will script out your genome, and you can pick and choose what characteristics you want to have accentuated or deaccentuated, like height, weight, muscle development, athletic abilities, personality traits, development of cancer or other diseases, and extending the lifespan. And this is all geared toward your child. So you can pick and choose what you want. If you want a taller baby, you accentuate height. If you want a skinnier baby, you deaccentuate weight rather. And this shopping list of genetic traits that you can choose for your child is eugenics. It's not that in the past with Margaret Sanger and all of her friends that they would convince an entire group of people that they needed to use abortion more readily than any other group, therefore creating the statistic that they are a lower minority. But now you or anyone else, if you can afford it, the FDA here in the United States is kind of going back and forth with 23andMe, and I've been following the story for the last about 6 or 8 months. The FDA sees this as an issue and a problem and says that their marketing techniques do not follow through with the product. So I'm not a fan of the FDA, but however, I am really glad that they're keeping it off the shelf here in the United States. But this venture, this corporation was set up by the former wife of Google and was imbued with several $1 million to create this by Google Ventures and Google themselves. So this is eugenics at the penultimate point that we could possibly imagine it now, where you can create whatever child you want. Blue eyes, brown hair, tall and skinny, short and fat, anywhere in between. Will be an athlete, will be a surgeon, will be the next Einstein, will be the next bum on the street. Whatever you want, you can accentuate or deaccentuate those genetics and create the perfect child for you.
Yeah, and of course they do state though that the products should ensure that they are CE marked, which is a kind of safety standard certificate. I think it's still a kite mark it's known as in the UK. And remember that no test is 100% reliable, so think carefully before using personal genome services. Well, it's probably not 10% reliable, but they're not going to say that. It's not 100% reliable, which means it could be 99% reliable, so you'll get what you paid for. But of course, you can't do this on your own. It's all very well you taking your genes, but now you have to match it up with somebody else. So you're not going through the normal stages of meeting somebody, get to know them, falling in love, marrying them, having children. Now you're starting from the baseline of what type of children you want and working your way backwards.
Yes, and it restructures the nuclear family even farther, where now we don't even have both parents in most cases in the home, and the children have to live with one parent estranged or not even in the picture. Now the child can be designed by birth to be whatever the parent wants it to be. And yes, this is in the beta stage. This is an initial company. There are no other startups doing this right now. So it is a new technology. And like you pointed out, nothing is 100%. And this technology is definitely not 100%. It's the first of its kind. It's new. So it's going to be rife with flaws. However, they are able to, even if in its great infancy, create this technology. So in 10 years, this will be a very different conversation if we were having it. There would be multiple startups with lots of different versions of this technology, some of them better, some of them worse. And the idea that it imbues in our culture is that we don't have to be victim of whatever we're going to have. We can choose what we're going to have and have a child that is more agreeable or less agreeable or this or that, instead of having children for the sake of having them and getting to know who they are and helping them be the best they can be. Now we can create them the best from the beginning. And that will change our entire culture if this catches on, if this becomes a norm or even a semi-norm or accepted in our culture. This would change our society drastically, because you would have the advent of the perfectly created people and the non-perfect people who were not created. And then you'd have that going on. You talk about division in our culture. That would be the perfect division, no pun intended.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've got parents determining what the child is going to be and what they're going to, literally what they're going to be when they grow up. say my father was a police officer or something. I want my son to be a police officer, so I'm going to make him, strong and fit and all this stuff. And then you have the child, and the child gets to 13, 14, and decides, actually, I want to be a chemist. Are they going to actually have to do something with the child's brain to make them make the brain fit with the body? I mean, that seems to be the next step, to make the child actually not be in a position of actually choosing what they want to be. They're actually going to create this, like we said earlier about creating the children now to write the code for the future. Are we going to be creating the humans now to do these types of jobs? If, say, we need people to build bridges, are we going to breed a generation of bridge builders? I mean, is that the way it's going? And make them of a level of intelligence, if you like, whereby that's all they want to do. And like Brave New World, we'll have different classes of people to do different tasks within society, and they'll have one job all the way through their life, and that's it, and they won't have any choice in the matter.
Well, we have that right now, and we've always had that. So I don't think it's going to be any different. The only difference I can see is the mode by which they're able to accomplish that goal. But we've always had class systems. We've always had people born into a class system. We have exceptions to the rule where people break out of their class system and become more financially stable if they came from an unstable class system. We have rags to riches stories throughout time and memoriam. But the method by which we're able to facilitate this constant theme that keeps running throughout our societies is drastically changing, to where we don't have to program our youth through propaganda, through the way that we raise through our generations, the stories that we tell each other, the norms, the societal norms that are accepted through the generations that we pass down to our children to control society. That idea would fall to the wayside more and more with the advent of this technology if this takes off, because you could create the person to have that propensity from the get-go cellularly. Genetically speaking, they would have that propensity to begin with. So we wouldn't have to do so much programming when they come out of the womb and are actually in school or in society. We could just facilitate their natural innate abilities.
Yeah, I didn't mean it in terms of a class structure. I just meant it in the terms of what attributes they would be given to do specific jobs, as it were. Not necessarily on a kind of socio-economic level, but just like building big, strong people to dig tunnels, for example, and little short people to, go down mines or something. But again, it's going back to what we were talking about earlier about the robotic teachers. If we're going to breed certain types of human that possibly be like computer programs written specifically to teach those certain categories, if you like, of humans with specific traits, and then they're given the education which suits those traits to make them fit for whatever task it is they've been kind of bred to do.
Yes, that makes absolute sense. A corporation who is investing in public education and doing so with the advent of technology, with the idea that that child going through K through 12 and then going on to whatever further education the higher education they go through, will facilitate their ability to perform a function at a corporation. That makes complete sense to me, and I can see them doing that more and more to the extent that maybe you're implicating here. Somewhere 50 or 100 years into the future.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what was portrayed in Brave New World, where the children were put in the tanks and they were constantly educated, in inverted commas, through a tannoy system while they were sleeping in these tanks, and they got their education that way, and they were bred to do whatever task it was they were required to do in the future, from being a baby, virtually, where there were no parents either, funnily enough. How far down this route do you think we are at the moment? I know you say this is new technology, but obviously this is a combination of a lot of technology or theories that have come before. Obviously the inbreeding, if you like, of the royals, for example, still goes on. Now, I can't imagine they're going to get involved in any of this stuff. They're going to carry on doing what they do, akin to the Borgias, and all breeding with each other. So so again, this is only for the general public. This is not for anybody who's actually in charge.
Oh, sure, they would. Oh, of course. If Paris Hilton's parents could have created a better Paris Hilton, I'm pretty sure that they would have. She's an embarrassment. Same thing with Kim Kardashian's parents, or Marilyn Manson's parents. I'm sure they would have loved to have created a better kid, but that one came out. The idea that the elite would not use this to create better generations for themselves, in my opinion, that would absolutely benefit. The royals would be benefited from using this technology as well, not only just to keep the genetics in their family sound, but also to create better leaders and better kings and queens and monarchs and leaders of government. Absolutely. If Bill Gates could control how his children will act and behave, he could safely leave this world knowing that the kids are going to do exactly what he would have done in that instance as the world progresses and time goes on. But right now it's kind of like a crapshoot. We tell our kids what we think is important, and they still have the ability to think how they want and act how they want. And regardless of how they go through their life cycle, most people end up rebelling against their parents in society in their early 20s, and then sort of laying low a little bit in their 30s and starting to emulate their parents in their 40s, 50s, and 60s on an average. There are exceptions to that rule. But knowing that we all go through this life cycle, and we kind of, generationally speaking, we sort of follow the same line, even going all the way back. Using this technology would mean that there is less room for error when you're trying to create the perfect person, to make sure that after you pass away, what you would have had done ends up being done, instead of the corporation that you created or the government that you created goes a completely different route. This person gets an office or becomes the CEO of the corporation, and then completely revamps everything and destroys everything that you made.
Yeah, I read an article out a few weeks ago regarding, I think it was 30 genetically modified children who had been born, I think it was 18 or 19 years ago.
Yes.
And they could only find 17 of them. They didn't say what happened to the rest. But I'm sure they just got lost in the ether somewhere, or I'd suggest they died quite early on, because if that was certainly a test, as it were, obviously it was, and it was an engineered project to do this 30 children, or whatever it was, they would have followed them right through their lives, and they would have known exactly where they were. So again, we're talking 50% success rate, if that. They didn't say how many of these children were perfectly healthy and how many were ill. The surviving ones that were still able to be found, allegedly. So I mean, they've been doing this for a long, long time. And I mean, it didn't actually say in those articles, I think, what types of genetic modification they'd actually carried out on these children, whether they'd removed certain traits or added certain traits. I'm sure we'll never find out. But as I say, I think it was 13 of them they couldn't find, they said. So they've been at this for a long time. So is this just a way of getting this into the public mind? And I'm sure it'll be pitched using people who've had children with disabilities, or people who have experienced in that kind of that whole sector, the disability sector, and they'll have some people come out and say, yeah, this would have benefited me or my children or whatever, and it'll be sold in that way. Again, it'll appeal to those who suffer from disabilities, and you can understand that, but it's certainly going to be pitched to the middle classes are kind of going down the toilet, but to people who've still got money and can still decide what kind of child they want. And again, they're trying to say to women, and men, you can freeze your eggs, put them away here. You don't have to have children till you're 50. The man can get a vasectomy, the woman can get sterilised then, and you can go off and enjoy yourself. You don't have to worry about getting pregnant anymore, because we've got your eggs frozen and all the rest of it. And presumably, with this kind of technology, they can pick the eggs and sperm they want and put it together and put it away frozen, and that's the end of it. They don't have to worry about it anymore, and they can just hope for the best 20, 30 years down the line that it's still okay, which there's no evidence to suggest it is.
Yes, that's one of the most shocking things about cryogenics. When they freeze the egg or the sperm, they find that when they reanimate it, it is goo. It's not viable at all. And yet there's a whole industry out there, and it's an invasive surgery to have your eggs removed and cryogenically frozen, whereas with men it's a lot easier to extract the sperm. So you're going through this for a woman, you're going through this horrible procedure where they have to go into your body and go and get the stuff, and there's no guarantee. In fact, the information that we have based on people who have been cryogenically freezing things since about Walt Disney's time, show that when they reanimate it, it's not viable, so you can't use it anyway. So this whole thing takes care of that. You know, this idea that we're talking about with 23andMe, that would take care of that. You can do it now, or you could do it later. The idea that we're living longer and we have the ability to maybe become parents in later stages of our life is a viable option, especially as we go forward. So the idea that, like you were saying, that you could have a child at 50, not necessarily carrying that child, but creating it, pulling out all the DNA that you like or dislike with 23andMe, and then going to a laboratory and having it grown, or have a surrogate. And that's another option that we've had for a very long time. You can have everything created in a petri dish and then give it to a surrogate and have them host the baby and give birth. So as we've moved forward from Greek times, where if you weren't born perfect, you were thrown off the cliff, now we are at the stage where we can use technology to make sure that you're born perfect, and therefore they don't have to worry about where society is going or how free of a thinking society could be, because now they have the power to sort of steer things along through marketing to make you want to have the perfect child.
In my experience, I've never met anybody that's perfect, and I don't think I ever will. So I don't think there's such a thing as a perfect human being, and neither should there be. We've all got our faults, and it'd be a very boring world if we were all perfect. But then, who defines perfect? That's another issue. Perhaps they'll give the embryos to robots to incubate for them, and while they're at it, the robot will educate them while they're growing up in this kind of electronic womb. Who knows? But anything further to say on that? I mean, it gets very science fiction-y, and I mean, you could go on and it become more and more ludicrous. But these people are serious.
Yes, they're very serious. Yeah, they're investing millions and millions and billions of dollars. Some of them billions, some of them millions. They're very serious about this because we're all afraid of what's going to happen when we die. That is an innate terror. And I don't care who you are, and I don't care what you say. You are scared of dying, and so are they. And they don't want to leave this earth in a painful way. And even if you die in your sleep, obviously there's got to be a moment of it hurts, and then you're dead. So they are trying to live forever in some fashion according to how much technology we have and what the technology is able to do. And so this 23andMe is just that idea conceptualizing for the next generation. Okay, I might not be able to live forever, but at least I can create somebody that I think is perfect who will live on for me. And then the idea that we're kind of alluding to, that you could live forever, the idea of imbuing consciousness into a neural net. Facebook has an AI laboratory, so does Google. Google X Labs is working on artificial intelligence and deep mind, and Facebook is working on a positronic neural net. So the idea that they could download who you are, your consciousness, onto an AI brain, and then you can live in that host body forever and just be repaired as repairs are needed.
Yeah, I'll be talking to Aaron France about this on Thursday. The whole hive mind concept, whereby your brain's kept alive and you're virtually living in the matrix, and any kind of world you want to live in can be given to you, and you will think you're alive, living in this kind of virtual reality world, which takes us on to the next article. Why Disney and Universal Studios want you to feel virtual reality. Now, I think at times the vast population, the vast majority of the population, are living in a virtual reality, which they think is reality. And, virtual reality has kind of become a bit of a grey area now because, as I say, we're surrounded by lies and deception wherever we go. So the reality we have now is not real. But this is taking it one step further, thanks to the development of ultra haptics. The endeavour of scientists at the Department of Computer Science at Bristol University, the future may yield interactive holograms that we can feel but not touch. Take it away.
This is a jump in the evolution of our digital age. The idea that they can imbue the feeling of something, that you can feel like you're touching something and not actually touching it, that it can trigger senses in your physical sensibility, that on something that does not exist, is an incredible feat, and it's not something to scoff at. And I'm not up-talking it or anything. I'm actually not imbuing any personal judgment on it. It is something that can be utilized in many different avenues. Imagine if you're watching a concert, a Michael Jackson concert, and he's actually in your living room dancing, and you can feel him, and you know he's not there. Imagine you go to the movie theater, and you can actually feel what the characters are going through, and you know that they're not there, and that you're not in the film. That interactive ability, that creation of the virtual reality, where we leave what is actually happening outside of our eyes, outside of our body, the entire environment, and become imbued into virtual reality. But we have beta step testing with that right now. Look what Second Life is. Look at these online video games like World of Warcraft, where you become a character, you have an online persona, you live in that world, you interact with other people online. It's like you're that character. In Second Life, you can start a business, you can make actual real money. There was a BBC documentary a couple of years ago that was hosted by Michio Kaku, where a couple met on Second Life and married in real life. They met on Second Life and had a relationship and decided to get married, and so the husband moved to the UK to be with her, and she has a business online, and she makes lots of real fiat. I know that's an oxymoron, but she makes lots of fiat in the real world by using this virtual technology, and right now that is about as close as we're going to get. However, Microsoft and other corporations, including the Disney and the movie industry, are interested in the development of this technology and using the Oculus Rift. If you haven't heard about that, that is Mark Zuckerberg's newest, or one of his newest acquisitions, where this technology is so accurate as far as the person using the goggles, the Oculus Rift goggles, being able to ascertain real life in a virtual setting, to the extent that the Norwegian military are using Oculus Rift to train their soldiers in simulated combat situations. So that'll give you an idea of how far technology has gotten.
Yeah, and Facebook's dealing with the executives at the major film studios to obviously promote this stuff in the movies. Again, we've seen that before with other types of technology. And, you know, we're getting into the kind of, I don't know, almost like, what's that's gone, the Minority Report kind of stuff here, with headsets on that you can see things and feel things, and the holograms and stuff, and basically envisage something happening in front of you, which isn't actually happening, but the thought processes in your mind can create that situation in front of you. Is that where this is going? I mean, the word rift, I mean, that's a word that suggests you're tearing something apart.
Yes. Well, the idea that you can reinvent yourself, everybody loves that. That's why we have cosmetic surgery. With the advent of selfies, we have a boom in the cosmetic industry, unfortunately, because people are taking more pictures of themselves and say, hey, I don't like my nose, I don't like my lips, and they're going to have it altered. It is the pop culture, the idea in which how we perceive ourselves and how pop culture defines how we perceive ourselves, which is pushing the idea of virtual reality, because there, you know, I have this body, I've had 2 children, it's not perfect anymore, I'm noticing some wrinkles, I'm noticing some gray hair, and there's nothing I can do about that. I can inject Botox and I can have cosmetic surgery, but it's not going to change the fact that I'm aging, and it is showing in my body. I'm 37 years old now. I'm not an 18-year-old. But on Second Life, I can be an 18-year-old again. I can have the body I never had. I could have the hair color I always wanted and not have to ruin my hair and put all this heavy metals into my system in order to get that hair color. I don't have to spend hours and hours curling my hair to get it curled, or pour all these chemicals into my system in order to straighten it out. I can have the perfect me that I always wanted here in virtual reality. And that is a great marketing tool, because we have been taught through multi-generations with the consumerist culture that the perfection of you depends on the ability of products in order to facilitate that perfection. And I realize that that's a complicated explanation. Basically, you're as beautiful as we can make you beautiful. And you want to be as beautiful as we can make you beautiful, because our beauty makes you makes you beautiful. So if you use our products, you'll be more beautiful. If you don't use our products, you'll be less beautiful. And we believe this. Go into your closet in your bathroom and tell me that you don't have any products that help you stay younger or stay more beautiful or stay more handsome. If you do, then you buy into that. And I'm not saying that that's good or bad, but that is part of the culture that we live in. It's one of the aspects. So virtual reality gives way to all of that consumerism and gives you the opportunity that you could be the most perfect, best version of yourself in whatever form. If you want to look like a unicorn, or you want to look like a model, or Cindy Crawford, it doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want, and that is a really amazing marketing pitch and sales point to have. It's an exorbitantly lucrative place to be if you're a corporation doing this, because everyone wants to be beautiful, whatever we agree that that is, and everyone wants to be smart and funny and exciting and have lots of friends and be liked by lots of people. And so the idea that you can be the most perfect version of yourself without going through surgery, without going through re-education, without uprooting your family and moving to another country and learning another language, it's amazing. And using this in Walt Disney and Universal Studios and Paramount Pictures, that's just the marketing sales of this. So you go to the movie and you see that they're using this technology in movies. You see that the movies are coming out at you, and the movies more and more beyond 3D imaging are interactive, and you can actually be part of the storyline as opposed to just being the voyeur looking at what's happening on screen. It's mind-boggling. It's just mind-boggling.
I mean, how far does this go? Do you go to the cinema to see a slasher movie and the guy comes at you with a chainsaw and you feel your arm getting cut off just to make it a bit more realistic?
It could, absolutely.
You mentioned open the bathroom cabinet and stuff like that and see what you got. Well, I've got shaving foam, a razor, and some plain soap. That's all I use. I don't use any shampoo or any of that rubbish. I've mentioned it before on here. It used to be the case that you'd walk into one of these, whether it's a Walgreens or Boots Chemist in the UK, Walgreens here, or CVS or one of the pharmacies. They've got rows and rows now of male cosmetics. And if they'd had them when I was young and I'd bought anything off those shelves, my friends would have beat me up in the street. It just so that's how they've changed the idea that men have to look after themselves the same as women. And it's exactly what you're saying there. It's going to be sold as this thing. You can be the best and brightest. You can be the most handsome, the most beautiful. You can have you can get rid of that grey hair just at the flick of a switch, and you don't even have to leave the sofa. You can just put this headset on and away you go. You can go on holiday to the Bahamas.
Brad Pitt, because he is one of the advents of metrosexuality. As far as celebrities going, making it okay for men to tweeze their eyebrows or to do their hair and to maybe shape their beard in a specific way. That it's okay for men to primp themselves. We have an entire industry of people cropping up in an industry that exists now where, like my son and my husband, go to a barber that's geared toward men. So it's got like a pool table in front and all this stuff and all these screens that are playing sports for the men, because men apparently want to do that while they're having their hair cut. It makes them feel more comfortable about having their hair done if they're around manly things. But absolutely, and think about this. Like, okay, I'm 37, and I've seen the change from John Wayne to Brad Pitt, from the manly man to the really beautiful, cute man who you might want to kill that spider because he's afraid of him too. What is this? What is the accepted stereotype of the role of men going to be 30 years from now? How are they? How is it going to be changed? Is it going to be more effete than it is today? Is there going to be a difference between masculinity and femininity?
Well, I mean, we're going well down the road to androgyny anyway. In a lot of cases, with we see women dressed as men and men dressed quite effeminate as well, and sometimes it's hard to tell the difference from any kind of distance. They've taught men that or not taught men, but they've portrayed men. Oh, long hair's great. You can have long hair, and a lot of young boys look like young girls, and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference unless somebody told you, or they were dressed up in specifically male clothing or female clothing, what sex your child was, and I think that's deliberate. And they've taught women that short hair is okay. And so it goes both ways, doesn't it? And in terms of going back to the cosmetics things, again, the carcinogens that are in all this stuff, now men are putting this stuff on themselves, and there's issues around fertility and all the rest of it, which goes back to the eugenics argument. Where does it stop? It's the chemical intoxication of men is now the same as it was with women, to a large extent. I mean, there's still a lot of men out there who wouldn't dream of putting moisturiser on. I'm one of them. I wouldn't even go to the barbers. I cut my own hair. I'm not that fussed whether I've got a pool table behind me or not when somebody's cut my hair. I'll do it myself. But
with the carcinogens rather that you were discussing, parabens are in most of your health products, in most of your toiletries that you have, and there is a rise of male breast cancer in the United States. Well, when they do these biopsies of breast tumors and in males and females, they find that it's 99% paraben, and that chemical is directly tied to all of these toiletries that you're using, all these body wash and these facial scrubs, and even in the Johnson & Johnson baby products that you're giving your children. So, like you said, the toxic chemicals are being sold to men and women through the guise that men need to be metrosexual, and the line between what's masculine and feminine needs to be blurred a little bit, and a little bit of androgyny is okay,
Yeah, and of course it makes twice the money for the big companies that produce this stuff.
Yep.
So we've only got 10 minutes left. So in terms of this virtual reality, I mean, I can see this being very cheap. Very expensive to start with, and it'll be pitched to again the people who've still got a bit of money and want to experience this thing. I can't remember the name of the film, but it's one of those dreadful Schwarzenegger movies where this company was offering you a holiday, and you went in and you put the headset on, and it took you to wherever you wanted to be, and it put you through a scenario. You could be a detective, you could be a James Bond character, or a fireman, or anything you wanted to be. And,
Total Recall.
Total Recall, that's the one. Yeah, and that's where we are. That's where this is going. And I can see this being expensive to start with, and then becoming very, very affordable for people, as much as they pay for the satellite televisions, for example. And they can do this at home, and they'll just be totally out of it. They won't be in any kind of real world whatsoever, and they won't be able to actually determine what is real and what isn't once they take the headset off even.
Yes.
There's just blurring the lines completely between reality and fiction.
Well, we have to remember, our brains cannot tell the difference between a memory, a dream, or a reality. And they've done experiments where they hooked brains up to computers, and the brain ran just like it ran in real life. So the brain doesn't know the difference. And to take that reality away and imbue the virtual reality is not that difficult for the brain. The brain will adapt. It doesn't know the difference. So it doesn't know that anything has changed. You and I know because we're not outside anymore. We're inside. So as more and more people stay inside, and it's easier to go to the Bahamas virtually than it is to go through the TSA and buy the tickets and deal with your luggage being lost and being molested by security guards. Who wants to deal with all of that when you can just put a headset on and go lay on a beach in San Juan or wherever.
It'd be great to put one of those headsets on Obama and give him that experience of going through the TSA and losing his luggage and all that, just to let him know how it feels. or something even worse. We'll put him through some medieval torture chamber or something, so he knows what people at Guantanamo are suffering, and maybe that'll make him think twice, but I somehow doubt it. I mean, how far down the line do you think we are with this? I mean, are we... I mean, it makes me wonder if, like the Total Recall thing, are we going to see a spate of people going absolutely nuts with this, almost to the point where they're schizophrenic, because they have no idea of what is real and what's not?
I think that it will gradually take a hold and become part of the social consciousness as time goes on. When there's a technology that is introduced into society that alters society drastically, like the car, it is ridiculed and talked against and fought incessantly until it is accepted. And so we all drive cars now, and it's not a big deal. The tractor is one of those technologies that put a lot of farmers out of business because they couldn't afford the technology, and they didn't want to get rid of the horse and cart or the bull and cart. They were happy with how they were doing things, but tractors took a hold, and you use a tractor or you don't farm. And nowadays farmers can't imagine not having a tractor, and I think that we can see that sort of progression happening with virtual technology as it goes on.
Yeah, I can see some really dodgy characters going along to this Total Recall type of place, and I fancy being an axe murderer for the weekend, you know, and stuff like that.
Oh yeah,
or worse,
every time.
Or worse.
Yeah, every time you play Call of Duty or any of these video games, you are simulating murder. And I have this issue with my son because my son wants to play video games. And sometimes he'll go online and play games that are online. And if I look away for a second, I tell you, he's playing some game where it's just the other night he went on and played some other game. He was playing one game when I was looking at him. I went to the kitchen to start dinner, and now he's playing another game 10 minutes later. And this game was promoting the more people that he killed. He got more points, so he was being rewarded for killing people. And I not only took the video game away from him and revoked all of his privileges that night and for a week afterward, but I explained to him that I don't want you to simulate something that I don't want you to do in real life. And that is desensitizing you to the idea that somebody's dying. And when somebody is dying because of you, that is a serious thing. It's not to be taken lightly. So, but we have entire culture right now. I have a very good friend who has an 11-year-old son who, among other things, is playing an exorbitant amount of violent video games. And big shocker to the mother, not to me, he has trouble relating in school, and he's very violent, and when he doesn't get his way, he becomes violent. Well, of course he does, because that's what he plays every single day, and he thinks that that's an acceptable response when you have an emotional reaction, to choose violence. And we're seeing more and more people choosing violence as an acceptable form of communication when they have a disagreement or an altercation with someone. And I think that is directly tied with the idea that we're watching more violence, we're listening to more violence, we're playing with more violence, and it's just, oh, who cares? It's just a simulated person, it's not real. But when it becomes real, we can't tell the difference. We feel the same emotional response when we kill someone in Call of Duty than when we kill someone in real life. That's how your brain connects everything biochemically. So this is a huge, serious problem as we're going on. It's under-addressed. It is scoffed away as like, oh, no big deal, we've always had violence. But when we had violence in the past, we had more communication with each generation and understanding that violence is only used in these specific terms, in these specific situations, that you don't choose violence as the first response because you have a disagreement or an argument with someone. Where now we don't have that kind of oversight and that kind of supervising going on with the other generation. The other generation is locked in their room at 13, 14, or 12, or 11 years old and playing violent video games while mom and dad are downstairs watching a violent movie on television.
Or sometimes watching a violent movie with their children in many cases.
Yes, even worse.
And laughing about it. These slasher movies, people, I know people have seen them as kind of, oh, that's funny. Well, somebody's getting their head cut off with a chainsaw. That's supposed to be funny. That passes as humour, and the children sit there watching it and laughing at it. So I mean, what kind of say what we're told is happening today, these beheadings in Syria or wherever, you can imagine children just saying, "Oh, I've seen that in a video game before, so it's no big deal."
That is exactly what they say. They don't know any better. It's up to us, parents and members of the community, to teach children what is acceptable and what isn't. And if you don't want your child to go out there and shoot people, then don't let them simulate that when they are at the most impressionable stage of their entire life.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we've only got a few minutes left. We're going to touch briefly on the police brutality issue that's prevalent in the States over the past few months, indeed. And what I've noticed is that they always try to portray the victim as somehow having brought it on themselves. I mean, whether they're bad people or not, it's irrelevant. Nobody deserves to be shot down 6 or 8 times in the street in cold blood, really, for carrying a knife or whatever. I mean, there are other ways of dealing with that. We're told tasers are the ultimate weapon of control for violent people, to stop them in their tracks, all this. But I've never heard of a taser being used in any of these cases. It just seems to be chokeholds or the bullet. And the victim's always victimised, and basically they brought it on themselves. They should have just done as they were told, and everything would have been fine. The police officer wouldn't have shot them 6 times. I don't know what your thoughts on that are, Susanne. I mean, it's been in the news so much that, again, it's part of the desensitisation process of it, I suppose. Oh, it's just another black guy being shot, or it's just another white guy being shot. Oh, he was a drug dealer, he was a criminal, he just robbed a store or whatever, so he deserved it. Well, that could be somebody's child, 5 or 6 years down the road, does something innocently, like steals something from a sweetie shop and runs away and ends up getting shot in the street. We shouldn't be desensitised to that whatsoever, and we should be looking at the root causes of it. Any thoughts on that in the last couple of minutes?
Yes, absolutely. I see that people are portraying the victims, the people who are getting shot, the people who are getting harmed by police officers, as, oh, well, they deserved it. Well, here in the United States, we have something that our Constitution affords us, which is due process, and it should be a right to everyone. The general public and the social consciousness, which is imbued with all sorts of stereotypes and unethical ideas and just misconceptions about who we are and how we relate to each other, should not be the end and be all when it comes to whether or not somebody has the right to due process. The police officers should not be imbued with the right to be executioner, judge, and jury. That's not what their intention was in the beginning, and it certainly should not be afforded to them now. I understand that there are instances, I have police officers in my family. I understand that there's instances where something is going to happen and it's going to be you or them. But we find more and more with every one of these cases, and I've written tons of articles about this, it is about race. The United States has not dealt with race yet. Yet we have affirmative action. Yet we had the civil rights movement. But people are still being victimized according to their color of their skin and the race that they are. And that, as long as that is there, we will constantly have these problems and constantly have this situation happening over and over and over again.
Yeah, as I said, Geoffrey, at the start of the broadcast, that until I see white guys or white people in general, or every nationality for that matter, actually getting out and protesting when a black person gets shot, or when a white person gets shot, we see all the other ethnic groups come out and support those families, then nothing will change. The whole thing is still polarised. You've got the black community. I don't like using the word black because I've never seen a black person. They're all different shades of brown. But I've never seen a white person either. So that's an albino. Until such times as people stop polarising these things into their own communities, black people supporting black people, white people supporting white people, nothing will change. They all have to get together and protest it as one kind of unit and say, we're not having this regardless of what colour of skin anybody has. Police brutality is police brutality, and that's the end of it. It's not a matter of whether the person was asking for it because he was shouting abuse at a police officer. That's irrelevant. The police need to be held to account regardless.
Yes, and until we fix the justice system, until we fix the police situation that we have, until we fix who is able to be a police officer, it's very difficult. In fact, I would say it's near impossible to not bring your belief system to your job. And police officers are no different. They're just humans, just like all of us. And if they are of a mental idea that minorities, blacks, Hispanics, anybody other than their ethnicity is beneath them or should be treated in a demeaning way, then they will bring that to their job. And if they have a badge on and they have a taser and they have a loaded gun, that's a situation where eventually somebody of another race is going to die at the hands of that person. And we need to, on a multi-level, get rid of this idea and just trash it. It's destroyed many cultures over eons. It's just a bad idea. It's stupid, and it needs to be gotten rid of.
Well, I think that's a good point to end on there. Thank you very much for your time again, and hopefully, I don't know, maybe a month or so we can have you back on again.
Absolutely, I'd love to.
Okay, we'll get that arranged. Okay, well, that's the end of the broadcast tonight, and as I say, I'll be back on Thursday with Aaron France discussing the age of transitions and the whole transhumanism issue. So with that, I'll say good night, and again, thanks very much to Susanne for coming on, and we'll hear from her in the future. Thanks.